welcome back to Twisted and Mysterious.
Yes, this is episode 2.
Episode 2. Thank you for listening to the first one.
Yeah, we really appreciate it, and welcome if this is your first time listening to us.
Absolutely. So we're true crime, mystery, all things creepy, and we've got another story for you today. But before we get into that, I had kind of an update on the last one.
Okay.
Remember, you asked at the end, we were talking about the Old Main Prison, and you asked if Ghost Adventures.
That was the one that Ghost Bros was on?
Yeah, it is not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
Because I knew that they had done one where there was like a really bad prison riot, but I didn't remember where it was.
Yeah, no, I went and looked because I was like, ooh, let's watch that. But they were not on that one. So, no, unfortunately,
Right.
Zach Bagans is slacking.
Yeah.
He should go there.
Yeah.
Another thing, if you listen on Apple Podcasts, if you could rate and review, please, because that will help us get into the new and notable category that would get us out to more people, and we would really appreciate that.
Otherwise, we are available on pretty much every other podcast platform.
Absolutely. And I think we have all of our social media set up now, so I think you can find us on everything. Except X. I did not sign us up for X.
No,
but
we don't need Elon Musk in our lives, but
you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Threads. I signed us up for a TikTok, but we don't have anything on TikTok yet. But everything is at Twisted and Mysterious. So if you want to find us on social media, that's where we're at. So
anything else?
No, how was your day?
It was all right. I got scolded by my endocrinologist because my A1C went up. But he put me on Ozempic.
Well, that's great.
So
we'll
see what that does.
I guess we'll see if on the next one you're flinging your rings at us.
Or my butt is flabbier than usual.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I guess, do you want to hear a story?
Sure.
Okay. So today I'm going away from true crime. We're going to do something more mysterious this time.
All right.
And this is a case that the New York Times calls one of the Western world's most intriguing and convincing modern cases in the history of reincarnation.
All right.
So we're going to talk about the story of Dorothy Eady.
Okay.
Have you ever heard of Dorothy Eady?
Is she the one that thinks she's Anne Frank?
No.
Okay. Then no.
Okay, cool. So I think that you'll like this because not spooky, but it's like mysterious. But also, you love Egypt stuff.
I do love Egypt stuff.
And this is Egypt stuff.
I especially love the mummy.
There's a mummy in this.
All right.
So good for you.
Okay. Love me some Brendan Fraser.
So I got most of my information from a website called Unsolved Mysteries and Paranormal Activities, and an article from the Business Standard, as well as Ancient Aliens.
Ooh, we love Ancient Aliens.
We love Ancient Aliens. In fact, I was watching Ancient Aliens during my prep period today with Ella.
Yeah.
And I put it on the big screen, and we were really enjoying it.
We haven't watched it in a while.
We haven't, but so when I first started this, I had not known this was on Ancient Aliens. But then last night, because I had done these notes so long ago, I was like, I'm going to go back and I'm going to look stuff up again just to make sure. And a thing about Ancient Aliens popped up, and I was like, I'm going to watch that one. So it was pretty good. Talk about it later. Okay. So Dorothy Eady was born January 16th, 1904 in Blackheath, East Greenwich, London. Her parents were Irish-born, Reuben and Carolyn Eady. They were lower middle class. Reuben was a master tailor during the Edwardian period.
Fancy.
Doesn't that sound fancy? So I was like, that sounds really old because
we don't call things
fancy things. We have like the Great Depression and the Great Recession and stuff. So
we don't have like fancy named periods after our monarchs.
Yeah. So I went and looked it up because I was like, is this really old? I mean, obviously it's really old because she was born in 1904.
Right.
But
it was a while back.
Yeah. Right. So the Edwardian period is actually from 1901 to 1910. So turn of the century, but not as long ago as I thought it was. Okay, so when Dorothy was 3, she fell down a flight of stairs at home and was knocked unconscious. The family physician came to the house and declared her dead. And then he left to fill out death certificate stuff or whatever he had to do. And he came back an hour later to prepare her body for the funeral home. And she was sitting up in bed playing. So possibly not dead.
Or undead.
Or undead, which, could have happened. Not really.
It happens. It happens often.
It's all the time. So, differing opinions on what happened here. She either died and then experienced some kind of spontaneous revitalization, or she was knocked out and it was 1904 and there wasn't like a ton of technology to check for life, I guess. But then they thought maybe she possibly had a rare brain injury because not long after she woke up, her accent was different and there were notable changes to her speech patterns. So have you ever heard of foreign accent syndrome?
I have slightly. I've heard of people that, their accents change spontaneously, but
So it's usually after some kind of traumatic brain injury. Patients can start speaking in a different accent. Speech patterns can be changed. There's also... We have so much editing to do today.
Sorry, I'm too close to that chair and I was trying to scoot.
All right. You got your drink there? Yeah. Okay. All right. So also, you can have something called bilingual aphasia. So there was a story about an Australian man who woke up after a car accident not being able to speak English anymore, but his limited knowledge of Mandarin was intact.
What happens if you don't have a limited knowledge of any other language?
I don't know. But
you just randomly wake up and you know how to speak French?
Well, okay, so there was, she doesn't speak Chinese, but I listened to a clip yesterday where an English woman who was suffering severe migraine, so not even like traumatic brain injury, although if you've ever had a migraine,
pretty traumatic.
It's pretty traumatic. She suffered severe migraines and then she started speaking with a Chinese accent.
All right.
And there was another one where an English woman had a stroke and she started speaking with a French accent, not necessarily in French, but with the accent. So I don't know. I don't know what happens if you can't speak another language.
Either you can't get that syndrome or you just start making up gibberish.
Maybe.
You think you're speaking French, but
possibly like Joey.
Yes, blah, 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 blah.
Okay, so anyway, so she started speaking with a different accent. Her speech patterns were different, but more than just a change to her speech, Dorothy also started asking to go home.
What kind of accent?
It doesn't ever say. I'm going to assume, based on the story, it's Egyptian.
Does she know what an Egyptian accent sounds like?
Well, we will talk about that.
Okay.
So she started asking to go home. And her parents were like, but you are home. And so they were like worried and they were confused. And she was telling her parents that she was dreaming of living in a huge columned building. And this kept up and her parents stayed confused. And then I say a year later, because it says now at age 4 and she was 3 when she fell down and bonked her head. They took Dorothy to the British Museum. And they got to the Egyptian exhibit, and she starts running around kissing the feet of all of the statues. And she sees a picture of the temple of Seti I, who is the father of Ramses the Great, and she exclaimed, "There's my home!" Stating that this was the place she lived, and because the picture was in ruins, well, the ruins of the temple, she asked, but where are the trees and the gardens? When her mother tried to get her to leave, apparently she yelled at her, "Leave me, these are my people."
All right.
So maybe she's Egyptian. Okay. So later in childhood, this is kind of a funny story. She went to an all-girls Catholic school and she was kicked out and eventually forbidden from attending Sunday Mass and then from attending the church at all because she kept mentioning how it reminded her of, quote, her old religion and often compared Christianity to Egyptian paganism. And they didn't like that. No. So they told her, don't come back. Dorothy kept journals that were made public after her death. And starting when she was about 14, Dorothy began to describe her previous life and claimed to be the lover of Seti I, and even described nighttime visitations with his mummy where, quote, he ravaged her.
Cool.
Gross.
like
You're
in
looking for
mummy
gross.
form?
Yeah, apparently, from what I understand, he was in mummy form.
Sweet.
Dusty.
Dusty, musty, crusty.
Yes, very much so. Also, she was 14. I mean, in ancient Egyptian times, I guess that wasn't a big deal, but, you know, in, I don't know, 1918?
I guess.
Yeah. I don't know. I still think it's icky. I don't know. And then his astral form continued to visit her more frequently from then on, and continued visiting her until she died. So, in all this time, so this long dead pharaoh is visiting her in mummy form. Dorothy was committed to many sanatoriums by her parents, but that didn't change anything. She held tight to her beliefs. She was steadfast in believing that this had been her former life. At age 16, Dorothy dropped out of school and went to work with her father in an early movie theater, and she studied part-time at the art school in Plymouth. And I'm so dumb because I forgot we were in England, and I was like thinking,
Massachusetts?
yeah. And I had to keep reminding myself that, like, that wasn't the first Plymouth.
No.
Yeah. All right. So,
That's Plymouth Part 2.
yeah, New Plymouth, if you will, since that's what we name everything. Okay, so she's 16. And around 16, she also starts claiming to receive visitations from an entity called Hora, who dictated Dorothy's previous life to her over the course of a year. So I guess this entity would like visit her in her dreams, and she would wake up and she would write down the story of what Hora was telling her. And she was writing it in a cursive hieroglyphic text that she did not know how to write when she was awake. And she wrote more than 70 pages of this.
I'm still trying to figure out how you write hieroglyphics in cursive.
Okay, so
Because aren't they just little, like, pictures?
well, that I was confused about that too, and so I looked at it last night, and I Googled cursive hieroglyphic text, and I didn't find anything like specifically. But then when I was watching Ancient Aliens, they said that it's called. Oh, let me see. I can't remember cursive hieroglyphic text. It is called. Oh, and of course I can't find it now. I don't know. It has a name and it starts with a D, but it was like some kind of way of writing, but it's called, I mean, it's basically like hieroglyphics in cursive.
Okay.
Yeah. I keep hoping that as I scroll down this that I will see the word, but I don't see the word. So
That's cool.
anyway,
Somebody out there knows.
somebody out there knows, or they'll Google it, or I'll Google it and post it on social media later. Anyway, so she doesn't know how to write this in waking form. Mm-hmm. So she's being like dictated this to herself, like somebody is dictating this to her while she's sleeping. She wakes up, she writes it down. This happens like over the course of a year. So the pages tell the story of a young Egyptian woman named I was so excited this morning whenever I listened to the Ancient Aliens man say it, because I was like, oh, finally, I know how to say this word. And now I've lost it. So it's Bentrishit, something Egyptian. Anyway, her father was a soldier and her mom was a vegetable seller. And her mother died when she was 3. And her father gave her to the temple of Seti I in Abydos. When she was 12, she became a consecrated virgin of Isis.
Okay.
Would you like to know what a consecrated virgin of Isis is?
Sure.
Well, I don't know. But I know that a consecrated virgin of Christ, apparently, in Catholicism, it's kind of like a nun.
Okay.
But you don't take like all of the vows that the nun takes. So you're not like living and working within the church. You live and work in the secular world, but you vow your virginity to Christ and you're called a bride of Christ. So I'm assuming it's kind of the same thing, but to Isis.
All right.
So I don't know. When she was 14, she met Seti I and they became lovers.
I'm sure I've seen things like those consecrated virgins on like Xena and stuff.
Probably, absolutely. And
There's always some kind of virgins.
yeah. And who knows? Maybe even in the mummy and we never paid attention. Anyway, so 14. So I guess this explains why Seti started coming to her when she was 14, because when she was 14, she met Seti the first. They became lovers. She became pregnant, which guaranteed death as a penalty after a trial because she was a consecrated virgin.
Right.
And you can't be a consecrated virgin if you're pregnant.
I mean,
I think it goes against everything that you vowed. So she knew that it would bring a lot of scandal and dishonor to Seti the First if this got out, and so she committed suicide. And according to the story, Seti was heartbroken and vowed to never forget her. So growing up, Dorothy spent a lot of time in the British Museum, possibly skiving off of school and hanging out there. And she eventually caught the eye of then renowned Egyptologist Sir E.A. Wallace Budge, who encouraged her to learn hieroglyphics. So on one source, it said that he saw her and took an interest and encouraged her. Then there was another one that said that she asked him to teach her. But either way, he kind of took her under his wing and he taught her hieroglyphics. And she would devour anything about Egypt while she was in the museum, the library, and she basically became an expert in Egyptology. She began working as a political cartoonist for an Egyptian magazine that was published in London, where she met Imam Abdel Magoud. I don't know.
your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah. Again, they said it on Ancient Aliens, and I didn't pay that much attention.
You should have written it out phonetically.
Should have. I was also grading papers while I was listening to it, and so it kind of went by so fast that I just let it go. In 1933, they moved to Cairo and married, and so she's finally in Egypt and home after 25 years of wanting to go there. It said that as soon as she arrived, she kissed the ground and said, "I'm home." She gave birth to a son, whom she named Seti, in honor of her long-dead Egyptian pharaoh lover.
Mummy lover.
Can you imagine telling your husband, "So this is what I named my son"? I wouldn't.
This is why we're naming our child this.
Yeah, that's weird. And then in Egyptian culture, once you become a mother, you take on the name of your eldest born child. And so she took on the moniker of Omm Sety, which means mother of Seti. Imam's family, the husband, they were upper middle class and they were upwardly mobile, and Dorothy wasn't exactly quiet about her reincarnation story, and they strongly disapproved. And so he didn't know her for that long before they got married, because he was studying to be a teacher, and he was in England for just a very short amount of time before he went back to Egypt. And then when he went back to Egypt, he asked her to marry him, and they wrote letters back and forth before she moved to Egypt. And so I'm guessing that she didn't tell him the story, or if she did, he didn't really take it seriously or whatever. But then once they're together, she's talking about this all the time. And so he's kind of alarmed. I don't know, maybe my wife is bananas. And so he left her after 2 years and he moved to Iraq. And on Ancient Aliens, it said that he filed for divorce and then he received custody of their child. But everything else I read said that the baby stayed with her in Cairo, where she chose to stay, and that she began working for the National Department of Antiquities to support him. So she started working for the National Department of Antiquities as a draftswoman. And she spent many nights sleeping inside of the Great Pyramid of Giza and placing offerings at the Sphinx, and the locals didn't really know what to make of her. So they admired her because she was following all of these cultural norms, and being very mindful of their culture and traditions, I guess. But also they were a little bit afraid of her because she keeps talking about her past life. In 1952 and 1954, she visited Abydos for the first time, where the Temple of Seti was, and she was convinced that all of her beliefs of her past life were true. She was like, "This is it. I know that this is where I lived." And in 1956, she received, quote, the opportunity of a lifetime, according to the Business Standard article. She was given the chance to work at the excavation in Abydos of the Temple of Seti. And she proved to be an invaluable resource once she was there, because not only was she basically an expert in Egyptology after all of these years of just studying everything to do with Egypt, but she would quote, remember something from her past life and tell the archaeologists, dig here, and they'd dig and they'd find exactly what she had described, which was super weird because there was no reason why she should know that that was there. Most notably, do you remember at the beginning when she first went into the British Museum and she was like, beware of the trees and the, she helped them find the ruins of the garden in the temple. She was like, this is where it's at. And they were like, there's no way. And they dug it up and that's where it was.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of cool. The chief inspector of the antiquities department was still in disbelief. And so he decided to try to challenge her knowledge, and he took her into Seti's temple in total darkness and would describe various wall paintings, and she would walk to each one described without error. And she even, I saw a clip of her talking about this in 1981. There was a documentary called Omm Sety's Egypt or something like that. And they were asking her about this, and she was like, yeah, they would, they were like, okay, where is this? And she would just walk over to it and they'd be like, oh, well, that's a fluke. Try another one. And she did all of them. And this is stuff that had never been published. So there's not any reason why, just somebody would know where all of this stuff was, especially in total darkness. And so the experiment left the inspector astonished. He was like, this is weird. I don't know why, but she knows where all the stuff is. So industry professionals, archaeologists, they took full advantage of her knowledge and her memories because she helped them make countless discoveries that couldn't be rationally explained. She was scheduled to retire in 1964 because the Department of Antiquities had a mandatory retirement age of 60, but she talked them into allowing her to work for another 5 years. She retired to the village of Araba el Madfuna, which is next to Abydos, to live out her remaining years. She lived on a pension of $30 a month, which I can't live on a pension of $30 a day.
I mean, money's different now, but still.
It sure is. But she lived on $30 a month. She stayed in mud brick peasant houses, which she referred to as Omm Sety Hilton, with cats and donkeys and pet vipers. And so I had read these articles and I had done these notes and I hadn't seen anything about pet vipers. But then when I was reading something else last night, she had some weird way with snakes.
Like that cow that's licking that cobra and that.
Well, that cobra doesn't not seem to like that.
I know, but he's also not attacking the cow.
That's true. But I guess there was one story where I don't know if it was on a dig or at one of the offices she worked at or something, but she befriended and started feeding a cobra, and all of her coworkers were just like, this is scary because she's just friends with a cobra. But she also had pet vipers. I don't know. It's weird. For extra income, she sold needlework embroidery of Egyptian gods, scenes from the Temple of Abydos, and hieroglyphic cartouches. Is that a right word?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. She would spend her days talking to tourists about what the Temple of Abydos looked like in her past life, and she continued to assist archaeologists. It was said that she subsisted mostly on mint tea, holy water, dog vitamins, and prayer.
Me too.
She did have a heart attack, a minor heart attack.
The dog vitamins.
Right. And her son tried to get her to go live with him and his family in Kuwait, but she refused, insisting on spending the rest of her life in Abydos, where she spent the last 20 years, plus her former life. And she also was said to have felt that she was atoning for the sins of her previous life if she stayed there. She was called the patron saint of Egyptology by James P. Allen of the American Research Center in Cairo. He said there wasn't an archaeologist who didn't respect her. And before she died, she knew that Christian and Muslim churches would never allow her to be buried in their cemeteries. So she constructed a tomb in her back garden, complete with a carved figure of Isis with her wings outstretched. But after she died, health officials wouldn't allow her to be buried in it. She died on April 21st, 1981, a local Coptic cemetery. And I was like, I don't think I've ever known what the word Coptic means. So I looked that up. It's the largest population of Christians in the Middle East. So they allowed her an unwanted plot of land in the desert without a grave marker, just a pile of stones. So it was kind of like an anticlimactic end to like this very extraordinary life that this woman lived.
Yeah.
What is our friend's name from Ancient Aliens?
You mean Giorgio Tsoukalos?
Giorgio. God, all day long my brain has like glitched and I couldn't remember his name. But Giorgio was like in love with this woman.
Yeah.
He was talking about how like just talking about her gave him goosebumps, and that she was like one of the most renowned like Egyptologists in our lifetime, and that, you know, she basically went from having no education because she was kicked out of school at a really early age. Sorry, I almost knocked my Coke off the table. To like just being an invaluable asset on all of these archaeological digs. And she would work for all of these famous archaeologists, like helping them like write their papers. And she wrote books on her own. And she just lived this very extraordinary life. But
Yeah.
So what do you think?
Well, I mean, it's weird, but strange things happen every day. So
Do you think she was reincarnated?
I don't know. I don't know that I believe in reincarnation or not. So,
Yeah.
but it's weird one way or the other.
It's weird because why does she know all of these things?
Right. And especially as like a 4-year-old, like, what does she know about Egypt?
Right. And ancient alien, how does he say it?
Oh, what is it? I don't know. I can't think of how it goes.
But anyway, they also like thought maybe she was receiving knowledge from another world.
Aliens beaming it down into.
Yeah. Yep.
All right.
Yeah. So there's a little bit of a mystery story.
And I just want to make a note. Sarah's not going to be the only one who tells stories. She just happens to have several ready, and I'm a slacker when it comes to research.
Farron is a slacker.
So
anyway, I don't know. Did you like that story?
I did. I mean, it was weird, and I like weird.
Yeah, weird is good. And I remember hearing it for the first time on another podcast, and I was just thinking, wow, that's an interesting story because it's not something you hear every day.
Right.
And like, you know, you hear people talking about reincarnation, and it just can be kind of like, I don't know, like you just like they claim it, or like, or
but they don't have like any like thing to back it up with.
Right. Or there's like the little boy who like was like talking about the Titanic, and that was kind of weird.
Yeah. And other ones that are on like naval ships or whatever, and they talk about people that they served with and who died, and they do research, and it turns out that these people actually existed, or people that claim to, like kids that claim to have like gone down in airplanes in the military. And
yeah. And so I don't know, but like this just followed like her whole life, and like she never like relented. She was like, no, this was my life.
Well, because like I said, there's the one lady who claims to have been Anne Frank in a past life. And
yeah, and I don't really know anything about that story.
I don't know a ton about it, but I mean, she, you know, has a lot of stuff to back it up, but also in a way, I'm not saying she's, you know, fraudulent or whatever, but like Anne Frank is a little more researchable than,
that's
you
true.
know, some of this stuff.
Right. Well, I mean, and like this lady was finding like things in ruins.
Yeah, ruins that are buried beneath the Egyptian desert.
Yeah. And whenever I was listening to her speak, like she did not have an Egyptian accent. She had a British accent. So I don't know if it's just like
faded over the years or.
Yeah. And she was living in England. So, you know, you pick up those accents. She just repicked it up.
She re-picked up her natural born accent.
Yeah. Well, thanks for hanging in.
Yep. And make sure you check out all of our socials and all the places that you can get our podcast. We're Twisted and Mysterious on everything.
Yes, or you can email us at twistedandmysteriousPodcast@gmail.com. That's the only one that's weird.
If you have any suggestions or comments or...
yeah, if you have any ideas for stories for us to do or anything like that, go ahead.
And even
send
if you
those
have
in.
listener tales, we're not ready to do a listener tale episode, but if you have any, we can start compiling those.
Absolutely. All right. Well, again, thank you. And I know this didn't come out on Sunday like our first episode did, but the holiday kind of messed us up, and hopefully we'll get on a
Regular schedule.
A regular schedule. Yeah. All right. Well,
Well, that's about it. And remember that people are gross and don't get murdered.
bye.